The most evident fact of our life is we are surrounded by sky wrapped in weather. Stones speak, hills laugh, worms sing. The great beauty of the universe makes us dizzy. Puppetry is a simplification device to make these incomprehensible riches accessible. Or puppetry is a form-giving technique that makes it possible to respond to creation. So why do we talk about Central America? Why don't we stick to the jolly practices of our trade?
The riches of the gospel became more accessible in the 1960s. The Pope of that time said, "We wish to personify the Christ of a poor and hungry people." This theology of liberation, as it was called, took root in the Third World and grew. And some men of God, those who had ears to hear, flowered in the Spirit. In El Salvador, tens of thousands were tortured, killed, disappeared. Death squads also targeted priests and others of the church for the subversive activity of teaching people to read the gospel and to understand that the Lord, El Señor, is on their side. Archbishop Oscar Romero spoke out on their behalf and in 1980 was martyred for it. It would have been very dangerous, probably impossible, to bring the story of Romero's life and death to his native land. But in Nicaragua, there are audiences that know a freedom still only dreamed of in El Salvador.
En el acto que ustedes presentaron, nosotros estamos viendo nuestro proceso de la revolución de Nicaragua.
In the act you have presented, we have seen the process of our revolution in Nicaragua.
Creemos que el mensaje
We believe that the message
que transmitieron a nuestros trabajadores
that you have transmitted to our workers,
lo van a sentir
they're going to feel it,
y de alguna forma
and in some way,
nos ayudará
it will help us
a que sigamos defendiendo esta revolución
to keep on struggling with this revolution
que tanto le ha costado al pueblo de Nicaragua.
that has cost so much to the people of Nicaragua.
Créanos, compañeros,
Believe, compañeros,
que nosotros vamos a hacer un gran esfuerzo
that we're going to make a great effort
para seguir mejorando la productividad del trabajo.
to continue bettering the productivity of work,
Y esto,
and that
el imperialismo gringo se va a dar cuenta que nosotros nunca nos vamos a morir de hambre.
Yankee imperialism will realize that we will never die of hunger.
Bravo.
In January 1985, Bread and Puppet Theater came to Nicaragua with a play about Archbishop Oscar Romero of El Salvador. The show was first performed the previous summer at the company's farm in Glover, Vermont, for the annual outdoor production called Our Domestic Resurrection Circus. Now, a 3-week tour, an entertainment and a gesture of solidarity toward the revolution of the Nicaraguan people was beginning. Each performance of the tour began with a freewheeling parade featuring a Dixieland band and stilt walkers. On a typically windy day, Bread and Puppet founder Peter Schumann led the 17 members of his troupe and a throng of citizens through the streets of Managua.
Usually it's heads and hands.
Las cabezas y las manos.
Sometimes it's full figures also.
A veces también figuras completas.
They are all built with clay first.
Están construidas con barro. Primero
First, I mean, that's how we built them.
Así es como
Let me
ellos
explain that first and then show some alternatives.
A bread and puppet show is large scale, with some puppets 20 feet tall and some productions involving up to 200 performers. In Managua, the North Americans were joined by about 30 Nicaraguan and Costa Rican puppeteers, beginning with rehearsals, workshops, and puppet building in the National Circus tent.
I don't know if you have access to cardboard boxes. Is that available in Nicaragua? Can you find cardboard boxes?
It's difficult, but you can find some.
The normal trouble with starting theaters is the idea that there should be some technique first before one starts.
El problema más frecuente en comenzar los teatros es que la gente piensa que debe haber una técnica dominada antes de empezarlo a hacer.
But there is no technique.
Pero no hay ninguna técnica.
It's not true. There's no
No es
technique.
cierto, no hay ninguna técnica.
There's no technique how to make a poem. There's no
No hay
technique how to
ninguna
make
técnica para hacer un poema.
a piece of music. There's no
ninguna
technique
técnica para hacer
how to
una
make
pieza musical.
a piece of theater.
Y no hay ninguna técnica para hacer una pieza de teatro.
You have to understand your social situation,
Hay
and
que
you,
entender la situación social en que uno vive.
hopefully you have something that you want to say to your neighbors,
Y se espera que usted tenga algo que decir a sus vecinos.
and then you have to invent the means how to say that.
Y entonces usted inventa la manera en la cual va a decir esas cosas.
Well, you must tell him that we are very interested that he should see that, particularly him, because it is about liberation theology.
Estamos muy interesados en que usted lo vea porque es sobre la teología de la liberación.
Yo también estoy muy interesado. Un amigo mío lo vio anoche y me contó cómo era.
He told them about it and he's very interested in watching.
Además, yo conozco la fama que tiene este grupo
And he knows about the fame of Bread and Puppet.
y es uno de los experimentos más importantes en el teatro moderno, eso lo sé.
And he believes it's one of the most important experiments in modern theater.
I hope you can see it. Tell him that if the wind isn't too strong. If the wind is too strong, you shouldn't come. Because the show is going to
Que
fly
si hay
away.
mucho viento no debía venir, porque se nos cae todo. Pero si hace poco viento, venga.
That's how it goes.
At the Grand Hotel, an earthquake and revolution-damaged art center, there were 5 shows. Religious and political themes were framed by an array of puppet animals and circus acts, a daffy, surreal counterpoint to the anguish of Central America.
Well, I saw it from a distance at Washington Square Park about 3 weeks ago, I guess. Big head of Romero and everything, and I knew it was the Bread and Puppet Theater, of course, because there's only one Bread and Puppet Theater in the world, and, you know, I've seen, you know, they played a major role in the battle against the war in Vietnam, so, you know, it's good to see them always. Wherever you go, you want to see the Bread and Puppet Theater right there. So it's good that they're in town, because Managua's the place to be, that's for sure, right now. I think it's the most exciting experiment in human living taking place on the planet. It's going on right now.
How did you come about in doing the piece? Is there any...
We worked the whole summer, last summer,
El verano entero del año pasado.
on many themes concerning Central America.
Se trabajó sobre muchos temas que tienen que ver con Centroamérica.
So we played about different countries. We played about the history of Nicaragua.
Se trabajó sobre la historia de Nicaragua,
about liberation theology,
sobre la
martyrs.
teología de liberación, los mártires.
And this piece
Y esta
that we brought
pieza
here was sort of the central piece.
Era la
We
pieza
played.
central del espectáculo.
And it existed already. We performed it in different cities, in New York
Se ha representado en Nueva York
and in Vermont, in
Vermont.
very different versions.
en muchas versiones. Cada
So
vez
this
hace una
version
versión
that we are
diferente.
playing here was really made with the collaboration of our Nicaraguan friends who got into it.
La pieza que se está representando aquí tiene la colaboración de los amigos nicaragüenses.
Because there are over 30.
Hay alrededor de 30 nicaragüenses que están trabajando en la pieza, que son de distintos grupos de teatro del país, como actores.
I think what's going on in Central America is the moral issue of our time, just the way civil rights in Vietnam were for the 60s. So it's good to see the Bread and Puppet Theater, San Francisco Mime Troupe, because that's people to people, and that's the way these battles are won. You can't win government to government. We can't outspend them. We can't outshoot them. We can only outact them and outdance them and outsing them, and that's where cultural groups play a role. We're all cultural workers, essentially, when you get down to it. If you're working for peace and justice, civil rights, human rights, we're cultural workers, and they're the ones with the biggest heads.
On the road in Nicaragua, the puppeteers stopped to perform in front of small country churches and large city cathedrals, in poor Managua barrios and on lush coffee plantations in the mountains, at a cattle ranch in the hills of Bahuaco, and even in a Matagalpa zoo. In every community, Bread and Puppet brought delight, while always focusing on the important issue, the struggle of the people to persevere.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rosa.
Señoras y señores.
We also want to tell you that the United States of America is not represented by Mr. Reagan.
También queremos decirle que los Estados Unidos de América no los representa el señor Reagan.
There are many people like us who totally disagree with this man's policies.
Que hay mucha gente como nosotros que está en desacuerdo total con las políticas del presidente Reagan.
And we are fighting this man at home.
Y que estamos luchando en contra de este hombre en nuestro hogar.
So, long live the Nicaraguan Revolution.
Así que viva la revolución nicaragüense.
¡Viva! ¡Viva!
El imperio guerrerista y los yanquis asesinos quisieran detener de los pueblos el clamor, asfixiando con sus garras a toda la humanidad, propiciando la hecatombe de una guerra nuclear para un mundo distinto y consecuente. Solidaridad ante una regionalización de la guerra, unidos venceremos contra el guerrerismo yanqui. Luchamos por la paz con la lucha de todos los pueblos. Solidaridad, nuestro pueblo está atento.
The Central American crisis and liberation theology have emerged in Bread and Puppet's repertoire only fairly recently, but there are parallels that go back 20 years. Issues like the Vietnam War, slum landlords, and civil rights inspired the troupe to take theater to the streets in the 1960s. At the same time, priests and nuns and others of the church were also beginning to work with and for the poor along the dusty roads of Latin America.
Ante una regionalización de la guerra, unidos venceremos contra el guerrerismo yanqui.
When I went to Italy in 1954 to attend the seminary and to become a priest, I had never heard the term liberation theology. I studied classic theology, that is, the theology studied by any candidate to the priesthood in Assisi and in Rome. But when I came here, I found that I had to fit what I had learned with the life of the people. For when one tries to live the life of the people, then the people teaches you, little by little. And if the people are interested in being liberated, then one realizes that one's own classic theology does not work properly when one tries to teach the people or tries to share their lives. In those times, the movement of liberation theology was already well known by Gustavo Uterez and by other theologians of the liberation in South America. But Nicaragua was very isolated because Somoza's dictatorship did not allow us to know those thoughts, those ideas. We very gradually learned what is now called liberation theology. We learned by accepting a practical compromise between our classic ideals and the life of the people. And then the church began to play an important role in the fight for liberation. Afterward, we saw that there indeed existed a formulated theology of liberation. But for us, the first step was experience, and then the theory.
Gathered here this morning to protest the United States policy directed against the country of Nicaragua.
Near Copenhagen, killing 22. The destruction of coffee processing equipment near Condega. Attacks on the town of Las Presa, killing 16. Attacks on Red
Brothers and sisters, I think that many of us here that are here do know what the reality is in Nicaragua, and that's why we're here.
Attacks on toll car workers in San Juan de la May, killing 7. The attack on a small non-militant village near
We're not here to direct any threats or against U.S. Embassy personnel, and we ask that you treat them with courtesy.
And the latest question mark attack in the mountains of Jinotega, killing 4, including 2 young women.
Many of us, I think, recommit ourselves every time they were here in Nicaragua to go back to the United States and teach the rest of the people, inform the rest of the people.
Likewise, we ask that you do not do any defacing of embassy property.
This wasn't the last attack. Today, 13 trabajadores were assassinated in San Juan de la May.
And as a part of that, our policy now is to ask people to remain behind the yellow line up front to keep the embassy personnel from getting a little nervous. We don't want them to think that this is the embassy in Beirut.
We are greatly outraged, and we are not prepared to stand idly by and tolerate this horrible travesty of justice.
So we ask you to join us. We have to go back and take the spirit of the Sandinistas, of unity, of hope, and of working together. No pasarán.
No pasarán.
Thank you very much. That's a pledge that we should all keep in mind, I think.
If you could speak directly to the American people, what would you say? We feel a great deal of love for the American people because we make a clear distinction between them and what constitutes the aggression of the administration, that is, a particular policy that has not changed throughout history. The first thing that I would like to tell the American people is that they should try to become aware of our history, to realize the fact that we are small, but that our smallness does not make us irrelevant to the history of the world. They live in a great country, but often it appears that they do not know or are aware of the realities of our smaller countries. If they could be made aware, then I am quite sure that they are sensitive enough to understand the real contradiction which exists between our actual situation and the situation ascribed to us by the so-called politic of the big stick, a politic of aggression, which has perpetually considered us as the backyard of the USA. That has to be corrected because we, as a people, have the right to have our own personality and characteristics, our own identity. They have never had a dictatorship as we have had with Somoza. It was very difficult to liberate ourselves from a dictatorship that was, in effect, imposed on us by them, since Somoza was the first chief, the director of the National Guard. It was like an intervention of the USA throughout the years, permanently in this country. Now that we are liberated and that our fight is legitimate, the American people have let themselves be deceived by the information, or better still, the disinformation, which tries to situate our problem as if it were an East-West conflict. But there is no East-West conflict. What there is a long-standing conflict between the U.S. and Nicaragua, a conflict which existed even before the Communist Manifesto of Karl Marx. We are not communists. We are Nicaraguans who want to have our freedom and who want to reconstruct our country in peace. Furthermore, we are absolutely certain that we will not be able to achieve this goal as long as the American people will not oppose, valiantly and with courage, the crazy politic of the President of the United States, who has been, after all, elected by the people, by their vote. This vote has perplexed us, because through that vote, the people seem like accomplices of the Reagan administration. We want to tell them that they should not be accomplices of the daily criminal occurrences, to stop helping the counter-revolution, and to allow us to enjoy that which has cost us so much pain and so many deaths.
En un discurso sobre América Central,
22 nicaragüenses fueron asesinados en una emboscada anteayer a las 8 de la mañana.
On May 9, 1984, President Reagan said, el 9 de mayo de 1984, el presidente Reagan dijo,
cuando subían en un camión la cuesta del Pericón, ubicada entre Tempaneca y San Juan del Río Coco.
We Americans, nosotros los americanos,
para dirigirse a las fincas donde cortarían el café.
should be proud of what we are trying to do. Debemos estar orgullosos de lo que tratamos de hacer.
200 contrarrevolucionarios tras lanzar fuego de cohetes Laos, RPG-7 y FAN.
In Central America, en América Central,
sobre el vehículo donde iban 5 vacas y transportaban 31 personas.
to support democracy, human rights, and economic growth. Respaldar la democracia, los derechos humanos y el crecimiento económico.
Consiguieron ocupar el camión con los heridos.
While preserving peace, mientras preservamos la paz.
Tras robarle a las víctimas, regaron diésel en el volquete y procedieron a prenderle fuego con la gente adentro.
So close
following part is called The People of El Salvador. It starts with the flags, with the green flags in the band, and it goes from there to all the flags. The yellow flags will be done on top for a little while, and else no change. It's flags, faces, and hands.
Are we going to stop before that?
Yes, we're stopping before that.
Right on.
A scheduled show in Somotillo on the Honduran border was canceled. In the week since Bread and Puppet arrived in Nicaragua, it had become a battle zone. The war raged on, giving an urgency and immediacy to the performances.
nunca tuve esa gracia, solamente hablamos por teléfono.
I never had the pleasure.
El Salvador.
We only talked through the telephone from Nicaragua to El Salvador, but once, when we needed to talk to him, he came directly to the phone. But Monsignor Romero did not need to be personally known, because immediately after his death, his image was transported directly here, to this church, in such a way that we feel that he is alive. We feel that he is alive and taking part in the struggle of our people. He is no stranger to us.
Hombres del ejército.
Hombres del ejército. Hombres del ejército.
Hombres del ejército. Hombres del ejército. Hombres del ejército. Guardia Nacional.
Guardia Nacional. Guardia Nacional.
Guardia Nacional. Guardia Nacional. Guardia Nacional. Policía.
Policía. Policía.
Policía. Policía. Policía. Hermanos son de nuestro pueblo.
Hermanos son de nuestro pueblo.
Hermanos son de nuestro pueblo. Hermanos son de nuestro pueblo. Hermanos son de nuestro pueblo. Matan a sus propios hermanos campesinos.
Matan a sus propios hermanos. Matan a sus propios hermanos. Matan a sus propios hermanos campesinos.
Matan a sus propios hermanos campesinos. Matan a sus propios hermanos campesinos. Matan a sus propios hermanos campesinos. Nadie tiene por qué cumplir una orden contra la ley de Dios.
Nadie tiene por qué cumplir una orden contra la ley de Dios.
Nadie tiene por qué cumplir una orden contra la ley de Dios. Nadie tiene por qué cumplir una orden contra la ley de Dios. Nadie tiene por qué cumplir una orden contra la ley de Dios. En el nombre de este pueblo sufrido.
En el nombre de este pueblo.
En el nombre de este pueblo. En el nombre de este pueblo sufrido. 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 Cuyos lamentos se elevan al cielo.
Cuyos lamentos se
Cuyos lamentos se elevan al cielo. 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 Día a día con mayor
Si me matan, voy a resucitar en el pueblo salvadoreño.
For any artist, whatever you do, music or theater, painting, whatever it is, your big question is always if it makes sense or not to do that. And in our overfed Western civilization, it's very obvious that what we do does not make sense. In this country, you get new ideas. You think that maybe there could be a social meaning, there could be a real integration of the arts into people's lives.
Escuchen mi canción, pueblos queridos. Ayutuste, Cusca y mexicano, una de hombres valientes, de heroicas mujeres, del guerrillero aquel que nunca muere, porque la historia misma lo eterniza. Me siento liberado en tus calles alegres, donde pasa el obrero, fatigado y sediento, escenario de lucha, donde el dolor se mezcla con la esperanza viva de una aurora mejor. Escuchen mi canción, hoy agitada, que le llama al combate callejero, a construir barricadas de amor y de ternura para el niño sin techo, sin pan y sin futuro. Escuchen mi canción, hoy agitada, que le llama al combate callejero, a construir barricadas de amor y de ternura para el niño sin techo, sin pan y sin futuro. Me siento emocionado al cantarle mis versos para que la recojan las barriadas alegres al compás de fusiles que ahora el pueblo empuña, presagiando la aurora de una patria mejor.